Good evening. My name is Larry King, and this is the premiere edition of Larry King Live.
So after 50 years in broadcasting and 25 years on our sister network, CNN, Larry King is getting a much-deserved Lifetime Achievement Emmy, and he joins us right now from New York. So congratulations. I'm thrilled for you. Were you thrilled? Tell me your reaction the day that they told you about it.
Well, it came by mail to my exec producer, Wendy Walker, and she called and she said, "Are you sitting down?" I said, "No." She said, "Well, sit down. The Emmys are going to give you a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Documentary and News Emmys in September in New York." This was about 4 months ago. And it really shocked me. You're always shocked to hear things like that, but you get a double feeling. A feeling of certainly accomplishment, 54 years on the air. And then also, you know you're not 26 years old. 26-year-olds don't get Lifetime Achievement Awards.
Yeah, because when you say Lifetime Achievement, I think that gives the idea with people that you're done, but you're not done. You still do specials, and you do stand-up. Which of your interviews makes it into your stand-up routine? I got to know.
I tell background. I naturally talk about the Brando kiss and other little things that happen to me off the air. The stand-up is mostly self-deprecating. It's an hour and a half of funny stories about me. We've been doing it everywhere. I'm going to Australia to do it. It's really it's a kick for me. I've been telling funny stories for a long time. Used to do conventions and sales meetings, and it was always kind of a good sideline. But this is like a Broadway production. My nephew produces it. He's a Broadway producer, and it has backdrops and videos, and it's really a terrific 90 minutes, and I do 4 specials a year for CNN, and we've got some other stuff in the work. I can't retire. I don't know what it would be like not to do anything. So I have to keep active, trying to spend more time with the children, and now this big thrill. And then the Friars Club is honoring me in November with the Lifetime Achievement Award also, which I think is some sort of signal. Now, if AARP wants to honor me, that's it.
You've interviewed, 50,000 people. How can that be? Of all of those shows, I don't expect you to remember all of them, but there's got to be one that sticks in your mind about the one you were most proud of, perhaps.
That's a very good question, Robin. The thing I would be most proudest of was when I had on at the same time for a full hour Yasser Arafat, head of the Palestinian group coming from the West Bank, Yitzhak Rabin, the Prime Minister of Israel, coming from Jerusalem, and the King of Jordan was on at the same time. So I had the King of Jordan, the Prime Minister of Israel, and the head of the Palestinians all on at the same time, all live, conducting my own diplomacy. That's a night you never forget.
Of all of the politicians, what interview with them most sticks in your mind? Because, presidents always came your way.
Well, each one was too much of a highlight. Nixon talking about having never been in or near the Watergate.
Is it hard to drive by the Watergate?
Well, I've never been in the Watergate.
Clinton talking very frankly about his life.
How did you emotionally hold up?
Well, I'm here.
I know, but how?
There was a moment with Clinton. We were preparing to go on. I did an interview with Clinton and Gore live. It's the only time ever that a president and vice president did a live hour together. But before that, we were standing in one of the rooms of the White House, looking out on Pennsylvania Avenue, and he said to me, "You don't know at times how lucky you are that you can just go out there, because I can't just go out there. There's a loneliness in this job," and it really struck me that why would anyone want to be president? Why would you want that job? Every president I've interviewed, I come away with that sense, but Clinton focused on it the best.
What interview of a celebrity do you think you're going to be most remembered for? I'm thinking, but you can correct me, that it's Marlon Brando
Probably
that was carried on Saturday Night Live.
The Kiss, yeah. Well, one, he was so hard to get. They did a takeoff on Saturday Night Live with Travolta playing Brando. Travolta does a great Brando. And then the interview itself was an hour and a half at his house. He did his own makeup. He wore suspenders. He was just incredible. But at the end, when he kissed me on the lips, I had no idea that was coming.
Remind me again. So why did he kiss you? Was he drinking?
We were just.
What was
it was the
going
end
on?
of the interview. We were singing a song. He loved old songs. And before we went on, we would sing songs. So, and since I got to know him, he loved to sing. Someday when I'm awfully low, and I sang, and he sang, and you sang, and then he looked at me and he said, "My friend," and he kissed me on the lips.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
And it just. But I'll tell you something about the suits. I forget who was. Someone in charge of production, whoever was in charge of CNN at the time, no longer there, called up Wendy Walker, our producer, and was very angry and said, "How did you let that kiss happen?" And Wendy said, "We're live." We're live. That's an example of the suits. We had to tell them that the show is live. How did you let that happen?
And what was your reaction to
hysterical.
being parodied on Saturday Night Live with that one?
Well, they kidded me a lot over the years, but that one was one of the best.
What interview did you never get, but you always wished you had?
I would love to have interviewed a pope, any pope, because I'm fascinated by people in that kind of positions and how they feel about what they do, and I was a lot into that, and I'm sorry we never got one. And we're still out, since I do specials, we're still trying to get Castro. I went to Havana last year, and we met with some of the hierarchy of the government, and they said if he does one more interview, he'll do us. So we still got hopes for that. But Castro, I don't think anyone led a country for a longer period of time than Fidel Castro led Cuba. And he was you'd call him a successful revolutionary. If revolutionaries are supposed to stay in power, he certainly did that. And there's always something about him that fascinated me. I lived in Miami. I was on the air the morning he marched into Havana from the hills with Che Guevara. It was New Year's morning, 1959, and it was my second year on the air. And I was on the air broadcasting, telling Miami that Cuba had a new leader. So he'd be number one along with any pope.
Now what about your interviewing style? Do you do homework or not?
I never knew how to discuss style. I knew when I started I never had an agenda. I knew I'd be back the next day, so the show involved the guest. The guest was never a prop to me. I try to ask short questions. I don't think I rarely have ever asked a question over 2 sentences. It was always a question. I never made a statement and waited for a comment. It always had a question mark at the end. I ask a lot of whys. I'm interested in the whys of life. Why is an impossible question to answer with one word? Mm-hmm. If you think about that, when you ask why, they have to elaborate. And I just try to get into the guest and to make them know that I care about what they're saying. And it wasn't about me. Mm-hmm. And too much of that I see now, it's more about the host than the guest.
I do like your point that the questions were always short, because, you've run into a television host or two where the questions are longer than the answers. In your years of TV...
And I tell you, if I had a motto, Robin, it was a good motto to live by, I never learned a thing when I was talking.
That's great. In your years of TV, how do you think it's changed in terms of what people, the viewers, want to know about?
Well, it's so fragmented. Of course, we're trying to guess that all the time. One of the questions in television news is, do we lead or do we follow? There's a tendency to say, well, for example, the public wants to know about the trial of Michael Jackson's doctor, right? Mm-hmm. So we in news would gather together and say the public wants to know that. And then the converse would be, how do we know that? Well, the ratings are good. Well, would they be better if we put something else on? Well, we don't know. So do we lead or do we follow? And in all news television, that's one of the great questions. And there's a tendency to go to the spectacular. And it's hard to turn that down. I mean, what do you say if you could show people that people are watching this trial?
You mentioned the Conrad Murray trial, which is starting. And you're talking about the doctor of Michael Jackson, who was with him as he died. So what questions do you want to see answered by this trial? What would interest you?
Well, the things that would obviously interested me is there's one overall question. What happened? Now remember, he was there, I wasn't. Here's where my concept of interviewing comes in. One, I have no presumptive answer as to the result of the trial. I will not find him guilty or innocent before the trial is over. I believe in the jury system, and I trust it. Therefore, I don't hear every minute of the trial, so how can I have a judgment? It amazes me that people could say, he did it. Did what? I don't know anything yet. I don't know anything until witnesses give their testimony. What I would ask him is, you were there, I wasn't. What happened? How do you explain a drug in the house that's only used in hospitals? How do you explain that? How did it get there? Mm-hmm. Did you administer it? If you'd administer it, why you'd administer it? How much does a patient control a doctor? Can I tell my doctor to prescribe for me? I take Plavix. That's a blood reducing. It thins the blood because I've had a heart condition in the past. Can I tell my doctor to give me more Plavix? I want to take more Plavix. And what does the doctor do? Does he refuse? In other words, what's the role of doctor-patient? That would come into it.
Did you watch?
Did Michael Jackson? There's so much to ask.
Yeah. Did you watch This Is It, the Michael Jackson documentary? Did you watch that yet?
No.
It's the rehearsals, of his shows leading up to those, final moments.
That I saw. The rehearsals were amazing.
They really were. And what struck you watching that movie, that documentary about Michael Jackson, and yet, the allegation was that he couldn't sleep, but during those rehearsals he seemed so in control.
That will always boggle me. I had dinner with him at a dinner. Jesse Jackson has this award dinner every year, and I got one of the awards, and he was my table mate, and he seemed very alert, and he was very shy. That night, the rehearsals, when I watched the scenes from the rehearsals, he looked so healthy and so with it and so in control. Michael Jackson controlled that. I mean, he wasn't, how about you do this, Michael? It was more him saying, we will do this and we will do that. So he looked perfectly healthy, and then, a day later, he's gone. And that will always puzzle us. Well, I don't know if we'll ever get the full answer to that. Death is a thing we all wonder about the most. A lot of times we'll hear about a person dying and someone else, I just saw him yesterday. He looked terrific. I don't know if we'll ever find out the whole story, but if ever anyone's going to give us the link, it would be the doctor, and that's what makes the trial fascinating.
I'm going to change the subject here. What do you hope people say about you, your interviewing style, your show, your legend, long after you're gone? What do you hope they say?
Well, I hope they say he contributed to the culture. He added to the knowledge of his generation. And I hope they also say, do you know Larry King? He was the oldest man that ever lived.
That's great. That's great. Now, there's an epitaph.